When the CCP felt that simple killing was not horrifying and exciting enough, they invented all kinds of cruel tortures. For example, forcing someone to swallow a large amount of salt without letting him drink any water. The victim would suffer until he died of thirst. Or stripping someone naked and forcing him to roll on broken glass. Or cutting a hole in the frozen river in the winter and throwing the victim into the hole. The victim would either freeze to death or drown. Father de Jager's book also told stories like the following one. A CCP member in Shanxi province invented a terrible torture. One day when he was wandering in the city, he stopped in front of a restaurant and stared at a big boiling vat. Later, he purchased several giant vats and immediately arrested some people who were against the Communist Party. During the hasty trial, the vats were filled with water and heated to boiling. The 3 victims were stripped naked and thrown into the vats to boil to death after the trial. At Pingshan, I witnessed a father being skinned alive. The CCP members forced the son to watch and participate in the inhumane torture, to see his father die in excruciating pain and to listen to his father's screams. The CCP members poured vinegar and acid onto the father's body. They started from the back, then up to the shoulders, and soon the skin from his whole body was peeled off, leaving only the skin on the head intact. His father died minutes later. If one were to suggest that these extremely cruel ways of killing appeared only in individual areas in wartime, then such violence became even worse after the CCP took power. During the Red Terror in 1966, all the 5 black classes, the landlords, rich farmers, reactionaries, bad elements, and rightists, were eradicated according to a policy of genocide across many areas. A typical example was Daxing County near Beijing, where from August 27 to September 1st of 1966, a total of 325 people were killed. The oldest killed was 80 years old, and the youngest only 38 days. 22 entire households were killed with no one left. Yu Luowen recorded a narrative in his investigation of the Daxing massacre. Beating a person to death was a common scene. On Shatan Street, a group of male Red Guards tortured an old woman with metal chains and leather belts, and then a female Red Guard jumped on her body and stomped on her stomach. The old woman died on the scene. There were many different ways of killing, including beating with batons, cutting with sickles, and strangling with ropes. The way to kill babies was the most brutal. The killer stepped on one leg and then pulled on the other leg, tearing the baby in half. Besides beating people to death, the beginning of the Cultural Revolution also triggered a wave of suicides. Many famous intellectuals ended their own lives at an early stage of the Cultural Revolution. The figures announced by the CCP for the Cultural Revolution were over 4.2 million people detained, over 1.7 million people died of unnatural causes. Over 135,000 people were labeled as counter-revolutionaries and executed. Over 237,000 people were killed, and over 7 million were disabled in armed attacks, and 71,200 families were destroyed. Statistics compiled from county annals show that 7.75 million people died of unnatural causes during the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution was the most frenzied leftist period in China. Killing became a competitive way to exhibit one's revolutionary standing, so the slaughter of class enemies was extremely cruel and brutal. The CCP mobilized mass campaigns inside and outside the party, starting to kill in the areas of literature, art, theater, history, and education. The CCP targeted the first attacks on several people. Later, the killing escalated from among all inside the party and army to all the people around the country. Armed fighting eliminated physical bodies. Cultural attacks killed people's spirit. It was an extremely chaotic and violent period. The evil side of human nature had been amplified to the maximum by the party's needs to revive its power in a crisis. everyone could arbitrarily kill under the name of revolution and defending Chairman Mao's revolutionary line. The Cultural Revolution was an unprecedented nationwide exercise of eliminating human nature. Writer Zheng Yi described the cannibalism in Guangxi province during the Cultural Revolution. The beginning stage. The terror was covert and gloomy. At midnight, the killers tiptoed to find their victim and cut him open to remove his heart and liver. They ate the organs in silence. The peak stage. Veteran killers had gained experience in how to remove hearts and livers while the victim was still alive. The head killer was entitled to the heart, liver, and genitals, while others would take what was left. These dreadful scenes were adorned with flying flags and slogans. The mass frenzied stage. People were madly eating other people. Often, victims were first publicly criticized, which was always followed by killing and then cannibalism. As soon as a victim fell to the ground, people took out the knives they had prepared and surrounded the victim, cutting off any body part they could get hold of. And people enjoyed cannibalistic feasts. Do not mistakenly think that such a festival of cannibalism was purely an unorganized behavior of the people. The CCP was a totalitarian organization controlling every single cell of the society. Without the CCP's encouragement and manipulation, the cannibalism movement could not have happened at all. A song written by the CCP in praise of itself says, "The old society turned humans into ghosts. The new society turned ghosts into humans." However, these killings and cannibalistic feasts tell us that the CCP could turn a human being into a monster or a devil, because the CCP itself is crueler than any monster or devil.